Hi everyone, welcome to the Car Chat podcast. And with me today, I have Henry Catchpole. Hello.
Hello, lovely to be here.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about sort of who you are and what you do if they've not come across you before?
I suppose I present car films for Carfection. That's probably what I'm most known for at the moment, but I still write for Evo magazine. I was there for about 12, 15 years, something like that, on staff there, and that's where I started and really sort of served my apprenticeship. I write for the Cyclist magazine as well, and yes, that's kind of me, really.
In a nutshell. How did you sort of get into it all, really?
Wow. Well, I suppose I've always loved cars. Growing up, my parents were into cars, and particularly MGs, actually, old MGs. So that ignited my passion for cars and bicycles as well. I suppose I was into those at a young age, as most children are.
Yeah.
And then it was, I suppose, one of the things I wasn't put into a cart at a really young age or anything like that, but it was a case of, I remember Evo magazine coming out in 1998, and I would have been in the lower sixth at school. My best friend at school, Bruce, he actually had a copy of the first issue, which I pinched off him and read. And obviously I read all sorts of car magazines at that point anyway, but when Evo came along, it was something different to me. It was, the photography was fantastic, and the features just seemed to be longer and more in depth, and there was that. It's a curious thing, because obviously I've talked about it with the staff there for over the years, and it wasn't a clubby atmosphere as such, but it was just, it made you feel part of something straight away. It was I remember really looking to see who had written the articles and that sort of thing, because they had each one had a very different voice. There wasn't a house style to the magazine as such, other than that everybody loved cars. So you'd get somebody like Peter Tomlin writing a beautiful piece that wasn't necessarily particularly technical necessarily, or might sort of feature sort of more of the sort of personalities of people, his early car of the years and stuff like that, as opposed to John Barker, who was much more technical. Anyway, I loved it, I need to say. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I think there was thoughts that I might sort of go and do law or something like that. And but I was like, no, I want to go and write for Evo, really. It wasn't even any other car magazines. It wasn't a case of sort of, oh god, it was Evo. That's what I wanted to do. I think, realistic and sensible enough to, I like realistic and sensible, not pessimistic, to think that, well, that might not happen. So I went off to university. I read art, history and philosophy, which is, so everyone says, did you do journalism? And I really didn't, because I sort of figured that if you can write, then it's hopefully that's enough. And if you're writing about philosophy, then hopefully if you can write about cars for some reason. But I did my dissertation on the BMW art cars, so I managed to sort of weave cars in there somehow. Obviously I'd learnt to drive in the meantime, on a 1.4 Mark III Golf CL, navy blue. It was a mighty thing, and I still reckon if you can heel and toe in one of those, then you can heel and toe in pretty much anything. So yeah, that was where I taught myself to.
I don't know why I thought about this. I was walking down the street yesterday, and I was just chatting to my other half, and we were looking at cars, and I was going, do you reckon people, because it was a learner car had gone past, or no, it was a Tesla with an L badge on it, and I reckon, do people learn with manuals anymore? And at what point in time will they stop?
It must be, I mean, the need to pass your test with a manual car must be rapidly decreasing, mustn't it? But be interesting to know, isn't it? It's sort of, you'd sort of hope people would still learn on a manual for some time.
We hope.
Just because we hope, but it does give you sort of, if you can drive a manual, and I sort of still think it adds something to understanding about an automatic car, particularly if it's got paddles on it.
Yeah.
Just an understanding of what you're doing, and I don't know.
And just how gears work and all of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Well, we'll see.
Yes,
hopefully, if I have a kid and it grows up and wants to drive, I'll be like, here's my old 2010 vintage mobile.
Yeah.
for you to have a go
Exactly
in.
that.
So,
Yeah.
and then, so do you just pitch to Evo and say, hey, I want to come work for you?
Pretty much, in many respects. I entered various competitions. I remember the Daily Telegraph running a young motoring journalist competition, and I wrote something for that. And I don't think I know I didn't. I think I got shortlisted. So I got my name in the Telegraph potentially for sort of on the sort of one of the top 10 or something like that, which means probably only 10 people entered. But I then leveraged that for all it was worth, to be honest, and sort of, look at this, look, I was shortlisted, and people they're not going to go and look up anyway, so it's fine. And I used to write sort of columns and practice doing stuff like that, but I met Harry Metcalf at the Goodwood Festival of Speed. I think it was in 2000, possibly 2001 actually, and he took me for a ride up the hill in the then new 911 Turbo,
Nice.
which had just been out, because I used to go and I'm not sure I've really mentioned this much before, but so I used to live just out of Guildford, so Goodwood was not too far away, and I remember going there sort of years before it was ever turned into what it is now. So when the paddock at the circuit used to be just some concrete on the floor and none of the lovely grandstands and all that sort of thing. But when the Festival of Speed came along, we went to the second year of that, and I've been pretty much every year since then. But the supercar run, I at a sort of relatively young age worked out that there were these supercars going up, and some of them had passengers in and some of them didn't. And so I thought, well, why can't I be in the passenger seat of one of the ones that doesn't have a passenger in? And I don't really know, because I wasn't a particularly precocious child or that bold or anything like that. That's quite shy, really. But seeing around cars, it just made me sort of think, well, yeah, why shouldn't I be able to have some of the piece of the action? So it took me several years to work out how to do it, because I remember literally approaching somebody the first year, and they were about to go up the hill and said, yeah, sure, jump in. Have you got a helmet? No, I don't even own a helmet. So next year I went back, and my father used to ride a Honda Cub 90, so pinched his crash helmet, which was much too big for me, but it was an old FM one with sort of like blue and pink on it and stuff like that. Didn't matter. Yeah. Have a helmet. Yeah, got a helmet. Next time the question was asked, have you signed on? So another year went past. So finally, and then you had to work out how to sign on. So you had to get into the drivers' club. So you had to kind of blag your way in. This sort of, and I was too young to sign. So my father had to come and sign for me basically at the time as well. Nice. So we both had to blag our way into the drivers' club, sort of saying, yes, we want to go and sign on for this. And and eventually I managed to convince somebody to take me up the hill. It was Jem Marsh actually, half of Marcos Cars. So founder of Marcos Cars, and his wife was standing there. It was one of the really, really early rainy years, and he took me up the hill in a Marcos in the pouring rain, and and I did that several times after that, and it sort of I managed to get work experience down at Maranello Concessionaires, because Tony Willis took me up the hill in 456, and I'd sort of said, I'd try to get work experience there in Egham, and didn't say any more than that. And then at the end of the run, he said to me, and I must have been 15, I think, at the time, 16 maybe, 15 I think it was. And he said, oh, what did, when you rang up about work experience, what did they say? And I said, they said you don't usually do that sort of thing. And sort of, even at that age, I was crafty and sort of worded it. And then he said, well, here's my secretary's number, give her a call, and I'm sure we can sort something out. So I did a day's work experience there.
Nice.
Yes, anyway, met Harry, wrote to him afterwards, and then I think a year or so later said, could I come and do some work experience for a week? And did that, and then went and did a week's work experience with AutoCar the year after, which didn't go quite so well. And and then after I left university, I was going climbing in the Peak District, and thought, well, I'll just take my portfolio of bits and bobs I've written, and then and my CV basically, and I decided not to join the army, so I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I was going to have a gap year, and turned up. And it was a time when Dickie had just gone freelance, I think, and it was sort of slightly in the transition period between the magazine being sold to Dennis, so it hadn't fully been sold, but there was a bit of a rejig. I said, oh yeah, we're a bit thin on the ground actually, why don't you give Peter a call, and I'm sure he can come back and do some work experience. And he offered me a month's worth of work experience, at which point I thought, right, there is clearly a job here. This is not
Yeah.
just sort of a couple of days. So it was then really just down to me to, not irritate them all too much. And that was it really. I kind of, and I went there and I proofread stuff, and making tea and coffee, I've said before, I think was the most valuable thing I could do. I didn't drink either at the time. I now love my coffee. Coffee up on the wall there. But
Nice.
it's I made tea and coffee for them all, because that endears you to people. I think if you stand up at 8 o'clock in the evening on a deadline Friday and say, anyone like a cup of tea? And oh yeah, go on then, Henry. And so you do all that. So yeah.
And then everyone's like, who's that guy?
Exactly that. Yeah,
We should keep him around.
and that's it. I think they just caved after a while. It was that I was there. I did 3 months work experience in the end, before they finally said, yes, would you we can offer you a job on absolute peanuts. And and I lived out of B&Bs up there because I didn't know anybody in the area at all.
Yeah.
And I used to go and I actually put on weight after university, because I was I'm skinny enough anyway, but I was really skinny back then. But I put on weight because the only meal I'd actually definitely paid for was the one I had in the B&B. So I had a massive breakfast every morning, just literally everything, cereal, cooked breakfast. If there was continental, I'll have some of that as well, and a yogurt to go down, and then sort of basically didn't eat the rest of the day. And and that was
You didn't do the cheeky bread roll filled with bacon in the pocket.
To be honest, it was B&Bs and sort of obviously people's houses. Most of them, I think, just they took pity on me, sort of clearly, and they were very good anyway. So
when you officially started working for them, what sort of thing were you doing?
I was enormously lucky, because it was at a time when they didn't want to throw me in at the deep end, far from it, because they wanted to know that when I came back from the launch and I'd reviewed a car, that they could trust my opinion, and that they were going to feel the same way about the car, basically. So I started out writing news briefs, which are little 60-word things, and sort of bits and long-termers, and a lot of the news section. And you start out on hot hatches, and you'd be allowed to drive other things, but it was very much a case of I didn't actually want to drive the big stuff first, because I wanted to know that when I got there, I'd appreciate it and feel comfortable driving it and feel comfortable reviewing it. So I think the one thing I did really, really want to drive was a Caterham. And we had an R300 with limit slip diff and the sort of all the bucket seats and everything. And I pretty much annexed that as my own long-termer as soon as I could. And I just drove it all the time. And if any car is going to teach you, how to drive, then a Caterham is sort of I was living the far side of Northampton at the time, and I knew every single roundabout and every single oil spill on every single roundabout sort of between there. And it was just, what an education. I think Jethro took me down to Bedford Autodrome at some point, and we spent the afternoon with me learning how to oversteer in a Caterham, which is not the easiest car to oversteer, actually, weirdly. It's sort of fine at little angles, but it definitely reaches a point where it will just
you're
go.
going around.
But that was a big part of my education. And then sitting next to the other people on the magazine as well, because another of the jobs that nobody wants to do is run all the timing gear. So we had the V-Box, and you had this ancient laptop. Actually, I was there the other day, and Dickie sort of called me over and sort of said, Henry, I had to try and dredge up all this memory of how we do this stuff. But yeah, I had to teach myself how to work this equipment, and then sticking aerials onto cars, and all that. And then we always used to do all the lap times and testing 2-up. So that was fantastic, because thankfully I don't get sick in the passenger seat of cars, and so I could just sit there, and I'd sit there for entire days basically going round and round Bedford, jumping in and out of different cars, and you just learn so much if you're looking for it, I think, and understanding what different cars do, because they're all obviously, they'd be driven quickly, but then also the last lap they'd have to do some enormous skid through the final corner of the West Circuit or something for the photographers. So you'd see all of this, and right, what are they doing with the pedals? What are they doing with the steering? How smooth are they? And also the differences between, say, Dickie and John or Jethro. So that was fascinating, and a education.
Yeah, and are people at that point in time sort of sitting next to you and giving you pointers, being like, maybe don't pull the handbrake then, or you're just going out?
It's no, I didn't really have. I had a day with John Lyon, the famous instructor, high performance coach, but in a 993, which was Harry's one that he bought. We did that down at Millbrook. So we did a little bit of road stuff, but by and large, I didn't really have any tuition. It was just a case of taking the opportunities where you could, and learning on the job, and sort of, hopefully relying on whatever sliver of natural skill you had and trying to just develop it, but not run before you can walk, I suppose. Because again, they didn't want. I think I did remember talking to John not that long ago, and I think he said, "Oh, we were all worried you were a bit too slow to start with," and it was because of what had happened at AutoCar that I was, I always thought, right, they just want a safe pair of hands. Clearly, if they say, "Here's a car, deliver it," we want it to appear there. That's what they want, not to be sitting in the office sort of, biting their nails thinking, oh, is Catchpole going to, crash this? So that was why I was, as unbeknownst to me, probably too cautious. But, I was sort of, but yeah, there we are.
I think it's better to be slightly on that side than the person that's on the other side. Have there been any memorable moments in cars on the road? Testing?
As in...
Or ending up facing the wrong direction in ditches or anything like that?
Well, I mean, I've alluded to it already, so I might as well tell the story. But the AutoCar one, which was, so I was on work experience there, and I'd done nothing really for the whole week. Barely spoken to anyone, I think, but written something. And then the last 2 days, I think it was their 0 to 100 to 0 challenge. So that was up at Bruntingthorpe Aerodrome. And Chris Chilton was going to pick up some Digitech Mercedes, I think, from Stoke Poges. So he gave me a lift down there in his Evo 7 Extreme, and then casually mentioned, he said, oh, you need to fill this up later. The fuel filler flap you open by pulling this lever here. And I didn't hear the rest of the sentence because I just heard him say, if you need to fill this up later when you're driving it. I was thinking, this is, I'm going to drive this? I'm in university at the time. I have a Mini Cooper, and that's by some way the quickest thing I've driven up to now. Yeah. And I remember just being terrified of this Evo when I got into it. We came out of the dealership, went under an underpass. Chris realised he was going the wrong way, so turned round. At that point, I realised there's basically no lock on an Evo, so it had about 20-point turn in the road. I babied it all the whole way up there, lost Chris instantly. Sort of found my way to the runway and thought, fantastic, that's it, I've done it, job done. This, I don't have to worry about trying to drive this thing around off boost anymore. And then I got taken around the aerodrome and sort of talking to Chris and saying, and he was doing massive skids through the corners in all sorts of machinery. And I said to him, where, like you just asked, where do you learn to do this sort of thing? He said, oh, well, places like here, because there's nothing to hit. So it's it's great. We then had to go back to the gatehouse to pick all the cars up and take them to the far end of the runway, which is this sort of, the muster point. And so I jumped back in the Evo, and it was wet. And I was, again, being very careful, but standing water. And then we come to the first few corners, and there's one onto the sort of the back straight, the access, and it's a long left-hander, and there's seemingly nothing there at all. And I was like, come on, you've got to be, take your opportunities. This is sort of, just push it a little bit at sea. And we came over the crest, and I now know what happened. I didn't at the time. I couldn't have told you what on earth happened, but came over this crest, just started to understeer a bit. So I lifted off, and we were going backwards before I knew. The bit between lifting off and me facing the wrong way, travelling at some speed because it's a quick corner. I have no idea what happened. I subsequently worked it out, hit the brakes, but of course we were still going far too quickly. Then we hit the grass, so we seemed to speed up. And next thing you know, I sort of basically come to sort of facing into these trees. And I tried to start the car, which was actually quite ambitious, because once I'd worked out, alarm went off and then it didn't really see. And I looked across at the passenger seat and there was just this big V. And it was a good job there wasn't a passenger there, because they would have been straight to hospital. And and I remember just getting out and walking across the grass and looking down at my shoes, sort of as the dew seeped into them and Chris went past an M3 CS, I think it was, and I remember seeing him herring past, and then just his nose, diving as he sort of braked hard and looked across, and sort of was like, "What happened?" I'm so sorry, and I spent the whole day apologising, and having gone from being very cautious to suddenly, my worst nightmare, just wanting the ground to open up.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So.
Was everyone pretty chilled about it? Or
No, not initially. No, they really weren't. I mean, Chris was nice. There was Robbo was there, and everyone chilled out sort of by the end of the day, and then the stories started coming out as well, I crashed this Diablo and we put it on the cover and it was the best-selling issue ever and all that and it was, but initially it was really not. I knew I'd screwed up, and I was I couldn't have been more apologetic and sorry and whatever, but I wasn't made to feel kind of like it was all okay, because it really wasn't. No. And that car stayed at Brunswick for quite a long time. Actually, needs to do laps in it, because it was hilarious, because obviously it was just totally bent and it was a write-off, but it was apparently quite funny to try and lap. Who was actually, I should say, who was very good. I came back to the office and Steve Sutcliffe was there, he was the editor at the time, and I hadn't really spoken to him all week. And there is a story that I was basically I think probably burst into tears on me, because he was going to measure something in the car park, and the stories vary between him having a golf club with him to take that back to the car, or having a ruler with him because he needed to go and measure something on a car. And once I'd caught the train back, and obviously because clearly I wasn't going to the second day of 0 to 100 to 0, and I'd been to a hospital to get checked out because it was a fairly big impact.
Yeah.
Made my way back to go and pick my Mini up, and of course I just didn't want to see anybody. I just wanted to pick my keys up from reception, and here's the editor walking towards me. So back into I'm just so sorry. So exactly, well, this is it. I didn't even notice that he was holding anything, but apparently this story went round that I was then utterly terrified, thinking I was about to receive some public school thrashing for my misdemeanor. And but he couldn't have been nicer. He literally said, it doesn't matter. He said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, "Fine." And he said, "Well, that's all that matters." He said, "Cars doesn't matter. They're just bits of metal at the end of the day. As long as you're all right, then that's fine." So he was, there we go.
I've had it where I've driven into a friend's bumper at not very fast speed and cracked it, and I definitely felt significantly worse than he did. And I've had someone reverse their car into my car when it was parked, someone I know, and cracked my bumper. And I was annoyed. We were going to sort it out, whatever. But when you damage someone else's car, to me, that is an absolutely mortifying. I never get over that feeling. Whereas often as the reciprocal end, if it's going to get fixed or whatever, you accept that these things happen. You're just like, yeah, no, it's fine. It's annoying, but it's fine. There's been, I don't know why it's just popped into my head. There was a track day, I think, in Italy at Monza. And there's someone driving around in, I believe it's an about to be delivered or just delivered Pagani Huayra something. And it gets hit by someone in a GT2 RS, full on taken out.
I've seen the video. Yeah. Yeah. That's
not
perhaps another level.
So you're writing articles at Evo. You're learning to do skids and drive and pick up your feelings on how cars feel. Did they have a sort of process of this is how we think you should review a car or talk about a car, or these are elements to look at, or to break down a car? Or were they just work it out?
Because I read the magazine so religiously, as you tend to, and what I did is I tended to try and book in cars, or if we had cars in, I would drive something and then go back and compare it to what they'd said in the review. So then you pick up, oh, right, okay, so I see, I get what they're talking about now. And I think, I don't really remember I'd obviously listen to what they'd say about things all the time. I don't think they ever really told me how to do it as such, tacitly. It certainly didn't sit me down and say, right, this is kind of what you're doing. I think as long as you had the right ethos, I suppose, mentality about it, because in the idea of the thrill of driving, and people and we're honest as well, because they didn't want me, certainly initially, to try and pretend to be,
Yeah.
you know, Dickie Meaden, because I'm clearly not. Still, you know, one day when I grow up, I might be, but it's kind of it's
Somewhat unlikely.
exactly.
You are
Yeah,
Henry.
yeah. I've got to shrink for a start. So sorry, Dickie. But it's, you know, like I said before, Peter Tomlin wrote some of the most beautiful prose for the magazine, the most enjoyable things, and yet he would, you know, he claims not to be. He's a perfectly good driver, but he's not of that level. He's not about to go, you know, racing every weekend or something like that. But he doesn't mean he can't review a car and say whether it's, you know, whether the engine excites him or not.
Yeah.
And whether it's, you know, a lot of it, apart from that very outer limit handling stuff, a lot of it you can get anyway. Anybody can get. They can jump
Yeah.
into a car as long as they're looking for it. And the biggest thing, I think, from their perspective, was just to give me the exposure to the biggest number of cars possible, because that's the thing that really, you have this memory bank then of, I've driven, you know, if you've driven a dozen hot hatches, or then you know, when you drive the 13th one, sort of, right, you can compare it to all those others. Oh, actually, yeah, the steering was better on that one, or sort of,
Yeah.
yeah, this one definitely feels heavier, kind of, and then you look at the figures and whether it is or not. So that's the thing. And obviously over the years now, hopefully I've got a pretty big memory bank of how a car feels. And it's something I've always, I suppose it's come pretty naturally. Because I love it and I love the feeling of driving cars, it has, I haven't needed to work at that too much. And you do, it's amazing how much you pick up, and I can drive a car and then recall what it was like to drive afterwards pretty well. So
Have you had it where, you know, things get rose tinted over time, because you've got this memory bank of cars you've driven, and you might drive the next version or whatever. We know we've just had the new GT3 launched today. I haven't seen too much about it, but it's, you know, 992 GT3 is sort of going to be what it says. But when 991 came out, for example, like, how long before had you driven a 997? Like, you know, when you compare the two, if it was 20 years ago that you drove one, maybe it's different. Because I know every time I drive a car, it's sort of different, because it's different conditions, different time, different mindset. You might have different music playing. You might be with different people, whatever. Like, all these sorts of things do affect how I feel about the car in that point in time.
Again, it all adds up to, like you say, the different things. And then the more you drive cars in different conditions, in terms of, so you know that a Cup 2 tyre is going to behave in a certain way in a certain condition. So that then you adapt the way you're thinking about the car to that. And if you've driven enough miles in other things, then that helps. I totally get, obviously, some cars, you know, if you're driving it in a, you know, sunny Tuscany on a beautiful day, then even a rubbish car can feel really pretty good. But I think there's, you have to be very objective about it if you're testing things in some respects. Sort of, it's this weird blend of the objective and the subjective, and I think you have to be careful not to let the subjective get too, not let that overtake any review. Add it in because it adds colour, and of course it's people want you to wax lyrical about things, and if you love it, that's brilliant. But at the end of the day, a car is a mechanical thing, and it will do certain things at certain points, and you can be very analytical about it, and that's actually what helps you. It gives you the nice grounding in any review, getting, oh right, that's doing this, doing that. And obviously you look at specs as well, so that can help colour some things. But equally, like I say, I think it's just this memory bank of stuff that you've driven. The more driving you do, the more driving you do in different cars, that's how you build up an ability to test stuff back to back. I think.
Do you, because most, I'm trying to think about it, most car magazines and that style of videos that are done are very much, you know, the person driving it is removed from the situation. It's just, this is what I'm getting, the raw stuff, you know, what's the steering like, what's this like, what's this like. And I think a lot don't give necessarily their opinion on the car as such. And I imagine, because if you have to go and review like 100 million cars and you just say, well, I love this one, And I don't like that. Immediately means you don't love another one, or you have a certain brand you like and you don't.
Yeah.
It gets a bit tricky over time.
If people say to me, what car would you like to own? Or I can give a car a 5-star review,
Yeah.
but it might be a car that I think I have no interest in owning that.
Yeah.
Because I can appreciate why somebody else would love that car.
Yeah.
And obviously I can appreciate the objective things about it and the fact that it is phenomenally fast and makes a great sound perhaps, or sort of all these things. And you think, yeah, absolutely, that is definitely a 5-star car. Would I want to own it? No. Because again, the more cars I get to drive, the luckier I am, the more I can become really, really specific about what I personally really like in a car and what boxes it ticks for me. And you can become more picky, but then you have to be careful not to let that sort of, you see what I mean, sort of encroach upon a review, which is, and particularly sort of, I think actually a lot of the time doing the video reviews, it's the internet loves a positive review. So they do. And I think again, you sort of, and I've realized that you can be, I obviously still say if I don't think something's right, and objectively if something is not as good as something else, obviously I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
But just coming at something sort of being a bit sniffy about it because it's not really sort of in my taste. And I did Bentley Bentayga. I did a review of that not long ago. Not my sort of car. However, there are things about it that objectively, the ride of the thing, the imperious feeling about it, you can see what the engineers were going for, and actually is very successful at what it's trying to achieve. So for me to come along just because I happen to like driving Caterhams and sort of say, look at that doesn't work. It's not. I wouldn't be a very good journalist and reviewer of cars if I let my personal sort of feelings about something encroach upon it. It's I think I said at the time that be like a restaurant critic going in and saying, well, I don't like garlic, so therefore this chicken Kiev's rubbish.
Yeah. No, that's definitely something, like putting yourself in the mindset of a potential buyer. Like, who is this aimed at? And is it someone like me? Like, okay, so for this week, I have a Bentley Continental W12 to drive. Amazing. And this morning, I'm driving it around, pootling around, doing some stuff. Can't really do that much with it at the moment. But it very much ticks the super comfy, waft, amazing interior, all of that stuff. I can see why people really like this. And then part of me was like, I almost think if this was sort of me in this car, the Bentayga might even be a better option because it's bigger and like more space, and like you can actually get people in the back, or more people in the back, sort of thing. But then for me, I like light cars, and it's a really heavy car. And that in itself, like there's something about the way it maneuvers around that I'm like, I kind of feel like I'm driving something really heavy, even though it's exceptionally capable and you can drive it quickly. It's just, there's just something in there. But for the person that wants something like that, that is an amazing bit of kit.
And there will be certain journeys that you do in that. I remember having one of the previous generation once, and I was rushing around and I was meeting somebody in a pub. Do you remember those? Sort of this place you went to and you meet other people and beers.
No idea what you're talking
about. and I was running late or cutting it very fine, and just a stressful day. And I got into it, and instantly you shut that door, and it's as though you've just shut out the entirety of the outside world, with its double glazed glass, and you sink into the seat, and at that moment, oh wow, this is amazing, and I should never forget that feeling of sort of thinking, yes, this is why you buy one of these. And I love cars as well. That's the other thing about it. It's hard to sort of, objectively, there are very few bad cars these days. No. As we've sort of said, it's not, you go back 30 years and somebody could have got the whole of the rear suspension utterly wrong, and it's then become a death trap. But it doesn't really happen these days. So you're then nitpicking again.
Yeah. And that car, for example, I would 100%, if I had a lot of cars, like a decent chunk of cars, I would have a V8 Bentley Continental, new shape, 100%. Like, it's that ability to isolate yourself from everyone else, and you're not in a Rolls. I'd rather be in a Bentley than a Rolls, just personally. Don't want that size and everything that comes with it. But it ticks that job of just isolate, just literally, just like someone giving you a hug. It's like you get in that car and then you just waft off.
Yeah, and I think if you like cars, then you can, and you don't get too, hung up on the sort of the particular clans becoming a particular sort of a Porsche fanboy. I love Porsches, but equally, I can appreciate all sorts of other cars, and I love driving, pretty much whatever it is. I like driving it, so it's pretty rare to get in something and think this is
this is awful. No, nothing's that bad anymore. It's very difficult not to, like you said, like start going down just in your head, being like, well, this brand's just better than this brand or whatever. Especially when you look at buying and selling and all of these and owning, because the ownership experience of some cars is significant. Some brands is much nicer than other brands, whether that's just resale value and all the other things that aren't necessarily about how good the car is, unfortunately. You're writing a bunch and then you started making videos.
Yes.
How was that transition?
Terrifying. Still feels very odd, if I'm perfectly honest, because it was. I'm just looking at this face, for crying out loud. It's something I didn't. As I just said, I didn't get into it to do videos. I was there to write. There was Top Gear at the time, but that was a whole other ball game that just didn't enter the equation, frankly. And then the internet started growing and being more popular and being this thing we really had to pay attention to. I remember, I think I went on some sort of course down at Dennis HQ, Dennis Publishing being who owned Evo. I don't think I took it that seriously because I didn't really want to be there, if I'm perfectly honest. And I think because I didn't take it that serious and I actually relaxed, and they went, "You're quite good at this." And I said, "Well, that's silly because I'm not going to do it." So sort of, I hate watching myself on camera, so that's very kind of you, but I'll have a hard pass on that. And then it sort of came along, you're thinking, hang on a minute, I'm going to have to do something with this potentially if I can, because that just looks like that's the way everything is going. And there was a point where I think certainly when the iPad came out and everybody was saying, well, this is the death of the magazine and nobody will, and it's thankfully hasn't been. But for a while it looked like my chosen career might be heading down a fairly nasty cul-de-sac. And then Sam Riley joined Evo, and we both had the same mindset about making films, because the other thing was, I think the films that existed at the time, let's say Top Gear was wonderful and beautiful and fantastic to watch, but seemed very out of reach. But equally, the sort of films that we could make in terms of just sticking a GoPro on the front of a car or something didn't seem to match with Evo and the photography that was in there. So I'd watch mountain biking videos, or you'd see skiing videos, and they were beautifully produced and sort of this fantastic escapism and brilliant scenery, and it just felt to me like that was really what we should be aiming for with Evo. So, and Sam got that as well, and we couldn't do that initially, but we sort of eventually got our chance to do it, and thankfully the reaction was really, really good. And so that's the sort of line we pursued, and I really enjoyed that side of it as well, and I still enjoy that side of it in the same way that I enjoy putting a magazine feature together, and I love the photography side of that, and I love the cinematic side of the film. So if we can do films where you can take me out of it, then great. That's sort of, I am the weak link, I think, but it's I love the visual side of it, and I think that's the really key thing. So that was the thing I thought, right, I like that, I can get behind that. If we can do those sort of things, then let's go for this and make it happen.
And does it stack up because I remember Evo, and I don't know whether AutoCar were doing it too much, but we started seeing tons of what could be perceived as high budget-esque videos coming out all the time. And then I remember watching from the sort of sidelines as someone that makes videos occasionally, got lots of friends who are YouTubers and stuff like that, just looking at it going like, how are they doing this and it actually earning any money? Because we know that that's expensive to do. How does it work? And it looked like it almost hit a wall at some point and everything exploded.
Yeah, I think it probably did, really. I think it was a case of, it was lucky that both Sam and I were on staff, so that helps, because obviously we're doing the magazine side of things, which at the time is obviously that's what's making the money, but also building the YouTube is something we want to do. So most of the time it would be both. It would be the three of us. It would be me, it would be Sam, and it would be Dean Smith who was doing
Yeah.
photos, and we would go off and create both a magazine feature and the video at the same time, and that worked really well, and we had some fantastic adventures doing that. It was just brilliant. But as you say, it does commercially perhaps not stack up to do a lot of that. And where I am now, I think a lot of people think about this with Carfection. They see what we do, and I think we produce some lovely videos that do look very...
I'd say they are the best in that space at the moment.
Very kind of you indeed. Thank you.
And massively so. I was talking to an editor this morning, from a production consistency, like the stuff that I see that possibly the audience don't see, but they just appreciate that it's nicer. Like the shot-to-shot consistency, all of this, everything is just, it's just done very well.
I'm not going to lie. When I joined Carfection, it was, at the time I'd just gone freelance, and I chose very carefully about where I was going to go, because I rely. It's not. I'm the face on the camera, like I've just said, but it's Charlie or Glenn or whoever behind the scenes. That's obviously, I rely on them to make me look good.
Yeah.
And I can have input and I can have ideas, but again, if we're not on the same wavelength, then it doesn't work. And it's nice because I can say to them, "Oh, should we try this shot? Or how about we do it like that?" And I can have an idea in my head about how I think, right, we're going to start this film here and pick a location or something, and we're going to try and do this, and I'm going to walk up some stairs, and then I'm going to say, come through the door, and then we'll cut the voice over here, and that will be sort of, and I have to rely on them to either go, "Henry, you've taken it too, that's not going to work for this very simple reason." And they're like, "Oh, yes." Or they'll go, "Yes, that sounds mad, but let's give it a go." And then it does or doesn't work. But what they do in terms of the editing and stuff, and we've kind of made a rod for our own back in some respects in terms of trying to up the quality all the time, and it's difficult at the moment because we can't rely on being on a launch somewhere sunny and wonderful in a new location. That it's easy to kind of riff off a new location that you've never been to before and think, wow, that rock looks cool, I'm going to stand on that. But if you've been to the same road 15 times and you're looking at it going, well, I've stood on that rock 3 times, I can't go and do it again, then it doesn't work. So
What is Carfection? Because I have no idea.
So Carfection,
other than a YouTube channel.
Other than a YouTube channel. So that's where we were going, wasn't it? I got distracted. We are part of CNET. So they are CNET. I'm freelance. They are part of CNET. And CNET, for those that don't know, is the world's largest tech website. It is enormous. I mean, it's like the 160th biggest website in the world. Not just it's phenomenal. So we are but a sort of a pixel on the decimal point, final decimal point of them basically, and hang on to their coattails, which is very helpful. And means that we don't just rely on the YouTube channel. It's part of a much bigger thing. So most people don't realise, but the videos are all uploaded natively to CNET. So when people go on there, they will see, or should see, the same video that's on YouTube, and obviously ad revenues, then etc. etc. So hopefully that makes a bit more sense.
I knew it was owned by someone, but I didn't know who. And it being someone like that or CNET makes perfect sense. They want some automotive content. For them, it's not crazy money to have some people come along. And if you went and did a shoot, I'm trying to think of one that I remember recently. Maybe 720S Spider.
Okay.
Like how many people would that be?
Oh, it's just me and Charlie. So I mean, most shoots are these at the moment. It's me and a cameraman. We will sometimes it'll be 3 of us because obviously it helps with tracking and things like that.
I was going to say.
But we have ways around that. Not that I'm going to reveal here. But
I've got some sneaky suspicions.
I'm sure you have. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, I think, and this is the thing. I think some of it is. I think there's a perception perhaps that it's all done with extra budget and extra time. And actually, a lot of the time you look, and we've had exactly the same access as everybody else. I'm not going to say we work harder because we just work differently to other people. And perhaps I've got a mindset about, right, if you're setting out to create a certain thing, then that's what you're going to try and create. And it's a different camera angle or a different way of looking at it. It's definitely, we don't have massive budgets. And the nice thing is, obviously, since I started, the equipment has changed so much in the last decade, and we're so, you look at the latest drones and stuff that we can use. I mean, being able to have something like a Mavic Pro that folds up to that, so you can take it on launches anywhere, and yet the shots from it look as good as a helicopter shot in some circumstances, and that is just extraordinary. And a DSLR can shoot fantastic sort of images, and off you go. It doesn't take a huge amount of equipment, thankfully, because again we haven't got the facilities to do it. And it's nice not being a massive team of people either, because it gives us the flexibility, and I think that's very, very good. So we are often rushing around, and a lot of it comes together in the edit afterwards. So
no, I can't remember who I was talking to. Someone about the difference between a small group of people working efficiently and then trying to like do the next level up, and just the number of people and time and everything, it all just escalates and goes out the window. And you go, well, can we just do this as like 3 of us or 2 of us? Because it will be way faster, way quicker, way better, and you won't be able to tell.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? And there are times when we sit there and have to say, we'll make shortcuts, which you may see a lot of people won't, and it's knowing where to spend the time to do stuff, and sort of, do we spend the time on that shot, or actually do we go and do that because people will love seeing that much more. It wasn't in the original plan, but so I think you just get better at it, hopefully.
Oh, and it's going well. I enjoy the videos. You've drifted and driven a lot of cars now. I'd say an extensive list. But when someone hands you like the keys to, I don't know, a Pagani or something, and maybe not so much now, but you need to get a cornering shot, is that quite slightly stressful or not too bad?
Yes. It's again, it comes down to a lot of factors. It depends. If the car's good and the car's actually, you have to kind of think of it right. It's just a car at the end of the day. It's going to it's understeer, oversteer, be neutrally balanced. It's going to do all these things, and you have to trust that fine. There's a number attached to it, which is, but from a pure driving perspective, when it comes into that corner, it's no different to my 1,500 quid Clio sitting out the back. It is. So that's what you have to come down to, and just, if you let yourself get too worried about it, then you're probably not going to do a very good job. And you build up to it as well. It's sort of, if you're doing that sort of thing, you pick your corner, and if you're not comfortable, don't do it as well. I'm not I'm not kind of above saying this is, I'm not going to do that. Thanks very much. It's sort of, doesn't happen that often, but if it's or at least not on that corner, you sort of think, right, we're going to do it somewhere else. So yes, that's I can remember driving, there was a Pagani actually, a Cinque, and doing the cornering shots on that, and knowing that it's the only one in the world at that point, and you're going to take it back to the factory at the end of the day, and there's the test driver standing down there who's probably much better at doing this sort of thing than you are anyway, and that sort of all, it does get the old heart rate going. But equally, when you see I think it's why you sort of, if you ever see a motoring journalist not looking in the back of the photographer's camera wanting to see what the cornering shot looked like, then they're faking, basically. Because we all want to see what it looked like, because it would have felt heroic inside the car even if it doesn't look like it through the lens.
It always, like, filming is especially bad for that. Stuff feels like mad, and then if it's just the wrong angle, the right whatever, it just looks naff on camera. Like, oh no.
And at that point you're like, just don't include it, because it looks rubbish. I'd rather not have that in there, because nobody's going to understand that it was absolutely what it took to get that. So
the car's sliding, but the wheel is pointing in the wrong direction. You're like, what's going on here? Presumably nowadays, though, that sort of stuff is a lot easier to get the shot from a photography point of view, because frame rates on cameras are so much higher, and with digital, and also you can capture a lot more frames, whether you've got it or are people just, your photographer's like, nah, done.
It's I certainly remember from back in the day when you'd have to go through a corner. You had to go through a corner, I don't know, at least half a dozen times.
Yeah.
Just because the photographer, as you say, couldn't look in the back of the camera, and it might be, minimum it was going to be 24 hours before you saw the result of the photo on a light box somewhere looking at it. So and there were some photographers that really wouldn't back themselves, as it were, and you had to do an awful lot of passes. It was a weird, actually, in terms of timings and going from there was a lovely point where it got to digital so they could see in the back of the camera, but then the screens weren't quite necessarily good enough at that point to really be sure that they were good. And then now they're brilliant, but again, if then you'd end up doing video at the same time, so then everything just took twice as long anyway, because you suddenly got a video camera as well as stills. And there we are. But yes, photography does take less time these days.
You must have a lot less time to just drive and work out in your head how you feel about the car with all the filming and stuff.
Yes and no. I suppose filming takes longer than photography, so you and you're in the car a lot anyway, and actually going up and down the same stretch of road a lot can be really helpful, because it's like being on a mountain bike and just doing the thing that nobody ever does. They just go out for a ride instead of actually sticking to the same corner and sort of trying to do it again and get better. That's effectively what I have to do. So it's you can learn an awful lot about a car whilst doing it, if you're looking for it, and obviously still whilst working out where the photographer's or videographer's standing and all that sort of thing. I'm lucky if a car gets delivered home, then I'll be able to go out before and drive it and just have a drive, and that's really nice if we've got a loan for that. But it doesn't happen a lot on launches. We had the Goldfinger continuation DB5 that we did a film on, and it was quite a rushed film actually. It was with Sam Riley, and we were relying on some of their B-roll and stuff, but I had to drive from Stoke Park, the golf club where they filmed the Sean Connery golf match, back up to Newport Pagnell, and it's a journey I know relatively well. I wasn't going to take the motorway because it just, and I just had that hour and a half or whatever in the car on roads that I know relatively well, and it was lovely. And there were no cameras there. There was nothing for me to do other than get from one place to the other and just enjoy the car. And that was just what a privilege, particularly in that sort of car, I think. Yeah. Where normally you might expect there to be mileage restrictions or something, or time constraints and stuff. So just to have that felt like a huge privilege, and just something to be soaked up and enjoyed. And
You've driven that stunt DB. Was it DB5 with the M3 engine in it? Yes.
Oh, what a car!
That looks mega.
Yeah, just brilliant. I mean, 1,000 kilos, 300 brake horsepower from a BMW straight six, naturally aspirated manual gearbox, and some sort of modern-ish but still old style rubber sort of on skinny wheels, and it's just brilliant. I mean, and basically, I think it was a World Rallycross car or something underneath in terms of all the suspension and stuff, and proper Öhlins dampers and that sort of thing. So if they produced that, they would sell every single one of those. I would have thought, because it's just everybody. I don't think I've seen a review where anybody came away from driving that not having the best time. And as somebody that owns a Mark II Escort rally car, I was never not going to love it, I suppose.
I think everyone I know that watched that video, and then a couple of people did videos with like the real one and then the stunt one and whatever. And everyone I've spoken to was like, the stunt one. That's the one I want. I don't give a shit about any of the other ones. Right. Like, that looked wicked fun.
It was so good. And lovely, but lovely that it looked the way it did, because that was a big element of it, I think. So, to be able to get out of something that looks so beautiful, but know that it drives like that, it is
an amazing contrast. How do you feel about the sort of rise of the RestoMod? Now, they've been around for a long time. Like E-Type Eagles and stuff like that have been around for a long time, but we're seeing a lot more now. I would say, you might disagree, a lot of supercars at the moment are getting very sort of homogenous. They are different. They do have their own characters, blah, 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 badges, whatever. But twin turbo V8 in some whatever body. Whereas all of these RestoMods are incredibly different, but seem to be getting much more popular. What do you think about them?
I love them. I absolutely love them, and I totally. So I was just going to say after that, that DB5 in a way encapsulated so much of what I think everybody loves in RestoMods. And when I first joined Evo, and I was however old I was, and I could have quoted pretty much every number in the back of that magazine in terms of the knowledge.
Yep.
It's all in there. It's just that was what it was. And I had to do the knowledge for a long time, so I was the person that, again, talking of jobs that nobody wants to do, I was the one that had to sit there and go through it all and enter all the details and do all that, so I know, is that right, wrong, whatever. So I had to do all that, so I know it's kind of... But after, I don't know, 5 years of being there, I realised I couldn't have told you, certainly the newer entries in there. I was like, why can't I tell you what the brake horsepower is of this? And it's because you realise that actually it doesn't matter. What the number is on a piece of paper is really irrelevant to actually how the car feels going down the road. You drive. It's one of the things with electric cars these days, whereby the numbers behind them, the actual acceleration, isn't necessarily as exciting. Doing a 0 to 60 in 2 point something in a Taycan or Tesla or whatever. For some it's weird because it's a very different feeling accelerating hard in one of those compared to, say, a latest 911, 992 Turbo S. Very similar times, but actually it's a very different feeling. Anyway, that's one for another day. But compare that to, I think the most exciting car I've ever done 0 to 60 in was a Murcielago SV. And I remember it was Saturday morning down at Millbrook, and it was a little bit damp, and we got the time, I think we got 3.6 to 60, and then somebody rang up Italy and said, is that okay? And they're like, yeah, it's all right, if you could have another go at I was like, fair enough, okay, we'll go and do one more launch of this, and you get everything, turn it off, and I thought, right, we're going to turn everything. They wanted you to launch it, I think, in sort of the halfway house, something like that. I can't quite remember. Anyway, you turn everything off. Basically, whereas normally you sort of think you'd try and limit the slip off the line, obviously, and you just want that maximum traction. Yeah. Actually, the way to do it in this was simply to light up all four wheels, and you just remember, you just light up all four wheels, and you just kept the revs, kept them spinning all the way through first, and it would also take attitude off the line for whatever reason. There's obviously some slight inconsistency, so it would go bang, and you just take attitude, have it all four wheels spinning all the way through first, this amazing noise from this naturally aspirated V12 behind you. You're basically just thinking, what on earth is going on? And then you've got a big paddle here, and you just be watching the revs with the mile straight ahead of you, pull the paddle, bang, and it snaps straight, and off you go. And then it was easy because you just pull gears whenever. Yeah. And that's what it took. 3.2, bingo. As fast as a McLaren F1, which obviously I can remember because it's an old car. And that in 3.2 seconds, my word, as hopefully you can tell, it has stayed with me. Yeah. And that's what I mean. The sort of the numbers, and this is what then brings me back to the RestoMods. So that, fine, the numbers attached to them. You don't really see sort of the people talking about the 0 to 60 time or the top speed on these things because it doesn't matter. And I think that's we've got the new GT3 coming out now, and it's not faster in a straight line really than the previous one. It is faster around the Nürburgring because it's got the new, and what interests me about it then is the new front suspension. Right? Yeah. How does it feel? Does it still, and it's crucial they kept the naturally aspirated engine because it adds so much more, and that's what you want from a RestoMod. And it's not about the speed, is it? I think that's sort of should almost be the strapline for all RestoMods. It's not about the speed. Yeah. And there you go. And it's interesting because they're all different as well. And Alphaholics is different to an Eagle, which is different to the Cyan Racing.
Do you have a favourite of the ones you've driven? If you were going to get given one and you couldn't sell it, because obviously some are more expensive than others.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'd be really torn because I love the Eagle low drag GT.
Very cool.
Sort of almost from just a pure aesthetic sort of point of view. I mean, they're fabulous to drive as well. But I remember being down at Eagle and seeing the very first body shell up on the wall and just thinking, wow, that is, that's really something. But Alphaholics, I love driving them. That might have to be the one I'd pick. Or I don't know. This is it. I really. It's weird, isn't it? Because I'm quite. A lot of supercars, I'd sort of
Okay, I'll give you
Gen
the
2
supercar
GT3 RS.
question. Current 200-ish grand supercar, which one would you have?
Well, I haven't driven new GT3 RS or new GT3 rather, but I suppose that would probably be it. Or if I could have the 991 Gen 2 GT3 with
See,
the manual
that's
box,
kind of funny because
that's the one that I would have.
and that's the same. That's the same for me. It's probably not that weird, but I did say 200 grand ish, and you've picked the GT3, which I think says so much about the GT3.
Yeah,
that you could have an F8.
Yeah, it's still a bargain, isn't it? And I think that's what I would have. And it's kind of I would love a GT3 one day. I think that's my sort of the car. It's the classic question, isn't it? The sort of the party question. Somebody's, oh, then what car would you know, if you can have any car, what would you buy? And of course you come back saying, well, really it needs to be at least a 5-car garage because you've got to have this and you've got to have that. And I couldn't leave that out. And I've just talked about at least 4 different RestoMods that I haven't been able to make my mind up about. So how on earth are you expecting me to choose one? But my answer was always, if I won the lottery, I would walk out the next morning, and I would buy a GT3 with a manual box. You know, probably the most recent one, all apart from 991 Gen 1. And then I would have a long, hard think about what else I wanted in this.
And why would you
collection.
have the most recent one? That might be a shock to some people who would go like, oh, the older ones are better or whatever, you know.
I wouldn't necessarily. I think I would have, at the time it was, so I haven't driven the most recent one, but I think the 991
Let's assuming
Gen,
the 992 doesn't, well, we know about it. We know about it,
but we haven't, In terms of just, I suppose, if I was only buying one car sort of at that moment, then I think the sort of the usability aspect of it sort of, and the 991 Gen 2 still had that feel. I remember it was ages before I got to drive one and took it out and it was a bit wet, but I just remember thinking, it's a proper 911 again, and had that feel in the wet where you, in that lovely 911 balance still that you could feel at that point, and Cup 2s in the wet are fun, so it's it's sort of, it was all there, and it had the fabulous engine. I think if I was choosing, I'd probably have I love the idea of a 997 Gen 1 with a 3.6. That I think is probably the one I would pick. I don't know why. I think I've just got a thing for them at the moment. It was also the first GT3 I think I drove. It would have been on Car of the Year 2006, probably. Spent a long time sitting in Marseille Porsche dealership waiting for a new first generation Cup rear tyre because somebody got a puncture in it. Not me, but
those things early days were kind of annoyingly difficult to get hold of. Car of the Year, and I can't. Okay, there's a few people do Car of the Year-esque performance things. Evo, were you involved in the Evo one this year?
I was, yes. Yeah.
So Evo and the M2 CS versus AutoCar and the M2 CS.
Oh, yes.
This is slightly controversial. one top, one bottom of the top 5. So obviously they're still considering it good. Yeah. What's your take on that?
Am I right in thinking they had the auto or the DCT?
Yes, one was a manual.
Yeah, and I do think the manual, having driven both, the manual is subtly better. There's actually a feature coming up in Evo at some point about the 2 back-to-back, so I don't give too much away. But I think it's a car that definitely needs, having driven in the wet, you need to get heat in those tyres on the circuit. Sort of, actually, you can, and it's really impressive the way you can get heat into those tyres, and it will give you a surprising amount. There's a disconnect. It's one of those things you have to be quite confident, thinking, actually, yes, this is getting more grip, because instinctively you think those tyres, wet circuit, that layout, front end, it's not going to have no traction at all. It's going to be absolutely, and it's not. There is actually sort of more traction than you think. Yeah, I love the M2 CS. It is utterly brilliant. There's just something about that package, and it's the sort of thing. I drove it obviously on Car of the Year, loved it, and you keep going back to it and checking and just thinking, no, the way that engine revs all the way out, and it can keep up with an awful lot of more expensive machinery, and you can chuck it around and it feels absolutely underneath you. I kind of like the fact that it's not too shouty in terms of its looks. It's just enough, it's special. I think we certainly, for Evo Car of the Year, we drove it on track at Anglesey, and then we had a week up in Scotland on a lot of different roads and in a lot of different conditions, and came out on top, and it was against
some good stuff.
Some big good stuff, and it was a really, really good year as well.
It's amazing how, like we said before, different car, different situations, different times, and whatever. I've driven two 9912 GT3s. I've driven PDK and manual. I almost couldn't care less about the PDK. It's a good car. It's a good car. But like when I drove the manual, I was like, oh, okay, no, like I forgot how much I love this part of it and how much of it is a huge part of it when you're driving it. If I was just on track, I could be PDK. I wouldn't really mind that much if it was just on track. But no, on the road, it's interesting how
it does,
that sort of stuff.
It does add something certainly to sort of, not every car necessarily, but yeah, it's adds another layer of interaction and interest, and yeah.
So another point on the car of the year. I understand why it is like this, but it's a car that's been produced in that year, which often means rivals don't get put against each other because they missed each other by a little bit. Porsches can't win every year because they don't make a GT3 every year.
No.
But when they do, they seem to do quite well.
They do.
But also, have you had RestoMods on car of the year?
No, I don't think we have ever had a RestoMod on car of the year, which would be, it'd be an interesting.
My follow-up question would be if you put the Alphaholics GTR in car of the year every year, because you can buy it every year, would that be it till the end of time?
It might be. Who knows? I mean, there is a strong possibility that could happen. I remember Caterham's got sort of banned from car of the year at some point because essentially it was the same thing turning up every year, and actually it was kind of sort of for the opposite reason, that they kind of didn't necessarily do particularly well, because there'd be people like me going, this is the best thing ever, and then sort of probably somebody like Harry potentially, well, I don't really want to get in there and stuff, I haven't got any waterproof trousers and this is not sort of so yeah, we decided to just sort of give it a lifetime achievement award and quietly sort of not have any more Caterhams in car of the year because it got a bit ridiculous. But jeepers, that would be quite interesting to see. You put the thing to do would probably be to benchmark whatever one against the same resto mod every year. So an Alphaholics or a Porsche 911 designed by Singer, reimagined by Singer, or whatever. So that would be quite fun.
That would be interesting. And I know these things can be done independently.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what
stuff.
Evo does. It's sort of kind of,
I've always been slightly interested, I don't know why I've thought about this, just looking back at older cars, at how quick older cars would be on current tyres. Because we do lap times, and you see Nürburgring times. Some manufacturers release them, and you look at that and go, not so sure that's real. And then some release them, and we know that you see customers doing the same lap time, so it's fine. But like, let's say, for example, the new GT3, just because whatever's come out, and it's 2 seconds quicker, or I think the new GT3 will be quite a bit quicker than the old one. But
it's 17.5 seconds quicker around the 20.6 kilometre track. It's because they're now measuring it over the two different distances.
Okay,
I know this because I've done a video, so it's kind of sort of, it's also 1.2 seconds quicker than the old GT3 RS. So there you go.
So what's the GT3 time? 150? Not 150.
No, so it's 659.9 is over the full 20.8 kilometre track.
Okay.
But then it's 655.4, I think, over the one that everybody used up until sort of this year or whenever it was, which cuts out those 200 metres around T13. So which is.
But if you put like, let's say, because the car at the moment, they're all on the Cup 2R Porsches.
Yeah.
Okay, not all of them, but like, GT3 RS and stuff like that. If you put a 918 on Cup 2Rs, how quick would it be?
I don't know, but it'd be interesting to find out, wouldn't it?
It would be interesting.
It really would. And the biggest, it seems that the biggest demonstration of that I think we ever had on the magazine probably was, and we didn't do it, it wasn't lap times, but it was, we did the analog supercars test, the greatest test I think Evo ever managed to pull together, where we had XP5, the McLaren F1 from McLaren, and we had a Carrera GT, had Murphy SV there actually, and a Noble and a Zonda and an F50 and an F40. I mean, it just still blows my mind that I was able to be there on that sort of test. But the Carrera GT was the interesting one because it was the first time we drove one on Michelin Super Sports. So that tyre had just come out. And the Carrera GT obviously has a reputation, and deservedly so. It is a tricky car to drive on its original tyres. And I hadn't driven one on its original tyres. I'd seen other people driving them and spinning them on their original tyres. But and it makes it sound as though they were sort of, they came on cross plies or something, but they might as well have done, seemingly, sort of for all that it was just, a really, really tricky thing to drive, particularly when those tyres were cold or it was a little bit damp or anything.
Yeah.
And you put it on Super Sports, and just instantly changed the car to being one that was just so Porsche, so drivable. I mean, I got in it and drove it, and it's still requires respect because it's a mid-engine car with a V10 behind you and all that, but it not scary. Just you could slide it, and it was fine. It didn't feel like it was going to spit you off at every corner. Far from it, and that was just that massive transformation. I think somebody has actually subsequently done a lap time potentially around the Nordschleife on updated rubber. I might be wrong about that, and it was a significant improvement. So yeah, I think Volterol did the lap time in the Carrera GT originally around the Nordschleife, and he was asked about how sort of scary it was, and he said, well, Flansgarten 2, so you come down over that sort of drop, and then somebody said, did you do it flat? And he sort of said, yes, once. and that was it. There was just, he did not ever want to do that again. So yeah.
yeah. No, it's interesting to see, because they're definitely certain cars and certain tyres really iffy, but then sometimes that can be a bit more entertaining.
Like I just said, I kind of like Cup 2s in the wet because it sort of comes back to it kind of comes back to the RestoMod thing, and I kind of get it's not for everyone, but I enjoy. It's always that funny thing of I say always that funny thing. I've been lucky enough to do some rallying, and if you're doing a gravel rally and you come to you've obviously got to drive between the stages, and you come into the first roundabout and there's cars moving around all over the place sort of, and you're sort of sideways at about 2 miles an hour around a roundabout because you've got massive great chunky tread blocks underneath you, and it's it's good fun.
I've seen the odd road test or review on a rally car on like gravel tyres and like gravel setup, and it just sounds like the most fun ever.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I fully intend to keep gravel tyres on my Escort all the time because it's genius. It's just a more extreme version of driving around on winters, because in the middle of summer, because they have that, obviously, just that feeling of that slight squidge, that just sort of shimmy where the contact patch isn't completely keyed in, and you've just got that sort of, I love it. I like that sort of, but I like driving things on cross plies as well, because again, it's just fun and interesting.
I had my first experience of rallying last year, and it so happened to be I ended up having to wear, I think it was about 30 degrees outside, and I was wearing the normal stuff you have to wear, but then I had to wear 2 face masks over the top of the things because of the current times. And I was in an Escort at Silverstone Rally School, and I had the most fun. A bit hairy as a passenger to start off with, being like, hang on a minute, this just seems nuts. And just the idea that, I can't remember the guy that runs the place. Their little track is really narrow. And his logic was, well, if it's narrow, you'll stay in it. If it's wider, you'll use the more space. And you, it's amazing after not that long how you suddenly go, yeah, okay.
Exactly. Yeah, you get used to sort of changes your decision making, doesn't it, a bit? It's
massively physical.
Yes.
There was a lot of like hairpins and stuff like that, which was, I think I absolutely ripped up my hands. Just yoink.
Yeah, I love an actual rallying, the adventure of it as well is just fantastic, because you're out there all day, sort of, you come back to service or whatever, but you've got the road sections in between times, and it's a proper day out, or several days out in terms of.
So do you get out in your car much?
Not much, no, because it's in several pieces at the moment. I've just bought a new engine for it, so 500 quid off eBay, Pinto. Yeah, nice. So that's kind of, we're in the process of need to get a new head for that next and pop it in and all sorts of things. So hopefully if everything comes back to normal, then we'll try and go and do maybe the Woodpecker again. In that, we've got sort of unfinished business with that. But yeah, hopefully, the intention very much is to get back at it and do some more rallying. So
I've never really watched that much rallying. I've sort of every now and then see some highlights and go, that looks wicked. And then when I was younger, there was always loads of Subarus and Evos flying around. But I sort of feel like it's having a bit of a resurgence, ignoring as someone that's not involved in it at all, with things like the Yaris, all these lifted cars, all these 911s that are appearing.
Yeah.
Whether it's the Singer DLS, I think that's the most extreme end of that one. Because I would love to see like a Fiesta WRC pack road car or something, like that.
Yes, and there is a Fiesta out there that sort of I'm trying to remember. I think it's R3 now. That sort of there's a much more road based and actually sort of coming through it. And I did a feature many years ago when they launched the R5 Fiesta, and I drove it up the Honister Pass. I somehow convinced Malcolm that this is a good idea, and it is amazing driving a proper rally car on the road. But I think there's the resurgence, as you say, that we're seeing from things like the GR Yaris, but also the Singer ACS and the bowlers and things like that, and the Nomad obviously as well. I think excited an awful lot of people, and the more that roads become restricted or viewed as, and cars become too fast as well, it comes back to that, and people start thinking, well, actually, perhaps a field, anyone that's driven anything around a field, frankly, they'll had the time of their life, and suddenly you think, well, why do I need this sort of need that? And I always tell people, if they want an experience, so sort of the red letter days experience or whatever, or track day experience, or you want to give somebody something for Christmas, always say, just go to a rally school, book a half day experience there. You'll get more seat time, and you'll be doing the things that you actually, in your dream, when you come back from the circuit, you think you were massively sideways around the last corner. And in fact, like most of us, it was just that one twitch that sort of. But actually, you'll go to a rally school and you'll be doing big skids because that's what they want you to do, and you'll be learning the car control that you dream of learning. So that's what I always think people should go and do. Go to Bill Gwynn or Phil Price or whatever, and
sliding about is the most fun. What is driving an R5 rally car on a road like? How does something like that compare to a normal road car? I say normal, pick any road car.
Noisy is the sort of, it's just, that's the kind of, I think the people don't realise in some respects how civilised even the most uncivilised of road cars is compared to a competition car, fully stripped of everything. I mean, you have to wear the ear defenders in there, really, and just the gear shift, the full brutality of making sure that you can't pussyfoot around it. It's certainly a thrill doing something like that. Obviously, also generally has naffle steering lock, so that's a pain, and you can't. And then you'll be sitting down low, so you can't really see out terribly well. So it's all these things that it's really good fun, but actually it would probably be pretty much the last car you take out on the Sunday morning, because you'd just be thinking, if I get stuck somewhere, this is going to be horrendous.
It's going to be a nightmare. Because I often, every now and then, have people that want to have a race car on the road, and I've driven race cars, and I have absolutely zero desire to drive a race car. Maybe the odd one off, just because, but like, it's all that stuff. It's like you can't see. They're not designed. Often they're not designed to reverse.
No, and the tong 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 tong. Sort of, you suddenly have an emergency stop, and you've got to, you're busy braking, and suddenly realise you've got to downshift. Otherwise, you're going to be there trying to just shift down through this. And then the steering. I mean, something like a R5. It's so pointy that that's completely impractical half the time. Or it takes people think Ferrari scooter is pointy, but or Speciale is pointy, but nothing compared to an R5 car. So all those things you realise it's not quite as simple making a road racer as it might seem.
Because those cars, are they set up so that a serious amount of lock is without having to take your hands off? Like it's a lot more than a
Yes,
road
I think sort of. Yeah, it's a tricky balance. I remember driving. Richard Tuthill did the 997 RGT
Yep.
when, and that was based on a Cup car. And actually, certainly when I drove it, needed probably more lock adding into it because it was based off the Cup car. So it kind of had no lock at all. And actually, when it was really quite tricky just to manage the slides within a small window, and you ran out of lock too quickly. So it's strange, isn't it? Because it all depends on it being matched to the roll rate of the car as well. So yeah, all those things.
all the stuff, and whether you've yanked the handbrake. Then it
Yeah,
doesn't
exactly.
matter.
Yeah, exactly. So because a lot of the time it's obviously not, you're not looking for big inputs. Sort of even something like a Mark II Escort. I had this sort of slight argument with Tiff over Twitter at some point because he was going on about how sort of Escorts are always massively sideways, and he put a picture of Ocean Price going hugely sideways on, I think, the red kite stages. And I spoke to Ocean about it, and he's like, yeah, that was a corner I knew my family was standing at, so I gave it the massive send. and I sent him a picture of this. I was look at Ocean elsewhere in the rally, and actually you're not having big angles of lock because you have the car sliding, but you don't, you want to, it'll be the way into the corner of anything else. You want the car straight like anything else, so you're getting traction out of the corner. And unless you're just an idiot like me who thinks it's cool to be really sideways everywhere, sort of, if you're being fast, then you're not actually. As sort of, it's the mistakes, and they still happen in modern WRC cars, which are obviously designed to be straight, but they will be sliding because it's sort of, you can't be straight all the time, and it's not a controlled
And there was a
environment.
weird click for me of, like, let's say you're doing a 90 right or something like that. In a normal car, you would slow down and you would turn all the way right, and then you would go, then the car would turn to the right. Whereas your rally car, you might be coming in or adding some angle with a handbrake or something. So you only have to turn a bit to the right, and then you're pointing forwards. And off you go again.
Yeah, it's a very different experience, and it's just, I mean, it's such an exaggerated version of what is so lovely in so many cars and road cars and stuff, and sort of, and 911's obviously exacerbated an awful lot because of their weight distribution, but it's weight transfer. That's what's really enjoyable about a lot of sliding and a lot of cars. It's that sort of understanding that and feeling at one with the weight transfer. And once you get that, that's the big sort of light bulb moment, the click where you really feel at one with the car. So
I think that's something that appeals massively about something like a Nomad, because you can just see it. The whole car is just going like, wong, wong, wong. You're like, that looks fun. That looks like it's getting it moving. I normally wrap these up with 5 questions.
Oh,
You ready?
Go on then.
Do you have a most memorable driving trip or journey?
I've been so lucky because I've been so many, but I think probably taking a McLaren MP412C to Africa, just because it was one of those things. So many things went wrong, and it nearly didn't happen. And it's a McLaren in Africa, particularly over the high Atlas Mountains, and that was a road trip. I'd had those roads in my mind for so long, and just thought, well, it's not going to happen. So that, and it was just me and Dean Smith, and it was, won't forget that in a hurry. Taking that car, and it never missed a beat, and it was extraordinary. Coming down the other side back towards Marrakesh, with all the there's no light pollution whatsoever. So seeing the Milky Way and everything, that's. Yeah,
sounds pretty great.
Yeah,
good bunch of people, cool location, plus cool car.
Exactly.
Ideal. 5-car garage.
Oh, you can't.
Unlimited value.
Unlimited value. I'm going to have. This is just today, right? So I can change it tomorrow.
Today. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Right. Well, let's have that, as I've talked about it. Let's have the 997 Gen 1 GT3. So I'm going to have a rally car. So that's going to be. Let's have an RS 1800 Mark II Escort Mark II. In fact, I'm going to have DKP, the Acropolis winning Rothmans one. So I think I might have that one. Then I'm going to have a Aston Martin DBR1 because you've given me unlimited budget. So I love that car, and the idea of watching Peter Hardman sliding that round Madgwick down at Goodwood, and the idea of being able to drive that round the circuit and then drive it home on a summer's evening and stop at the pub on the way back, and I think that would be
very cool.
Yeah, that would be pretty good. then obviously I'm going to need something,
Some daily-ish.
some daily-ish. I'm going to have a new Defender.
Ooh,
Yeah, there we go.
interesting.
Just because I might change my mind tomorrow, but I think
Would you
just-
have a 90
I
or 110?
think I'd have I like the 90. I love the look of the 90, but I have to have a 110 because I'm buying this. I'm buying it. You're giving it to me for practical reasons. So I'd have that, but I'd have the Explorer pack on it as well because I think that that breaks up the side, gets rid of that odd square on it and stuff, and you get a roof rack, so you can do all that sort of thing.
Put a spade on it or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Dig myself out of Woven Sands or wherever I adventurously go. But yeah, I can bungle the bikes and stuff in the back of that, and I can tow rally car to stages and stuff with it. So, and I like bit of roading, bit of sort of going camping and stuff, bit of an adventure. But I could daily it as well, so that's kind of a bit big for dailying, but there we are. So what's up to 4?
Got one more.
One more. I've got to have a Ferrari. Let's say 458 Speciale. I think just as my one sort of modern.
Yeah, modern.
Most modern-ish supercar. I know we've got 997 G3 in there as well, but I think that's kind of.
That's a good. It's a good duo.
Yeah, it's quite nice, isn't it? I think so. That would probably be it.
If you're going to drive one car for the rest of your life, and you're allowed a £500 banger on the side,
it would have to be a 911 of some sort.
Obviously.
So obviously, I think you get used to it, wouldn't you? That's the thing. I think you think of things, you think, oh, I'm not sure if I could live with that every day. But I think if you live with it every day, you would probably get used to stuff. So you could go. It just
becomes your car.
Yeah, it becomes your car. So you could probably have a 2.7 RS or something.
You could do that. That's definitely doable.
I'm saying I'm going 2.7 RS. There we are. I've never even driven one. There we are.
Oh.
How weird is that? If I'm picking a car I've never even driven. And saying I'm going to live with it for the rest of my life, but there we are.
You have the option, I guess, to RestoMod it slightly.
Yes,
sacrilege.
Yeah, exactly.
But, you could put in a stereo or something.
Yeah, you keep the original parts, wouldn't you? So it's fine.
Yeah. What's the most undervalued car at the moment?
Ferrari 550s seem to be going bizarrely sort of. I just love that car, and again, it was one of those cars that Evo trumpeted back in the day as being the greatest driver's car of the last decade and stuff, and they don't seem to be a huge amount of money at the moment. I've seen them at the various auctions things. I mean, obviously 1,500 for a Clio 182 I think is a massive undervaluation, but and some of those hot hatches I think will go up in value, or might perhaps they won't, because they're French and they just fall apart probably eventually, but in terms of value, do you know what I mean? There's sort of 1,500 quid for that amount of fun, for that sort of 2 litre naturally aspirated engine, manual gearbox, great chassis, kind of what's not to like about that. So yeah, there we are. That's 2 cars.
Yeah, absolutely. And final question: what is the most interesting car to you at the moment?
Electric cars.
Okay.
Not I suppose, and I mean that not in terms of it's a whole new area. A bit like it's almost akin to going from writing for a magazine to presenting on camera, because just the kilowatt hours instead of all these things that I'm having to learn about, and the more EVs that I drive, and I've driven in the last year, I'm getting there in terms of getting my head around them, and they're changing so much all the time that actually that's probably the thing that I'm having to think about most and interested in, is probably sort of perhaps not the way I'm looking at it, but I am interested because, again, I want to see where they're going to go. Where are we going to get if this is the way it's going, and we don't manage to get, I'm still hoping synthetic fuels will save an awful lot of what I love in cars and you love in cars, but EVs are going to be a big part of the next 10 years, certainly. So yes, that's something that I'm interested in, because sort of certainly from a professional point of view.
Yeah, it's a topic that I've found myself thinking about a lot recently, like kind of it's worryingly too much, so much so that I'm worrying like what's going on with you. But like just at the moment, walking around on my daily walk, and there's like pollution and stuff like that, and you think, oh god, like it does seem a bit archaic, all this stuff, and then you just, how does this pan out? How does this work out? And then where are we at right now? And it seems, I don't know what your opinion is on this, like sort of the state of the market right now. If you were to buy a new car, which not putting Genesis in the thing at all, but just people in the car industry, like my friends, everyone. I don't buy that many. I wouldn't buy many new cars. I would always buy secondhand just because
they're expensive, aren't they?
It's just expensive. It's just an expensive way of spending a year with something that's not beneficial. But if I was to change a car to have something that was either hybrid or electric, what would I be looking at? And does it work yet? And is there even any point yet? Like, I don't know. How do you feel about it at the moment?
Some of the ones, the Polestar 2, I found very impressive. That's the one, I think, of the sort of ignoring the higher, more expensive end.
Yeah.
That's the one that's made most sense to me. Has felt, I saw somebody describe it the other day, I think it's been comfortable in its own skin, and the whole Google interface, fine. I know a lot of people would sort of say, well, it's Google inveigling itself in your car, and I don't like the sort of Big Brother aspect. I get that totally, but in terms of an actual operating system, well, exactly, yes, there we are. It's the sort of the way the mapping worked, and just silly things like, not silly things like putting in a destination, which you can do through the voice control because it actually works for once, and then it giving you, right, at your destination you will have this amount of range left, and suddenly that takes away pretty much all the range anxiety, because you're then like, right, well, that's fine, I can make my decisions based around that. So that was hugely impressive. I like the little Honda E. That felt fun.
That was cool.
And not enough range, but it kind of felt actually quite rear wheel drive as well. So that was nice and fun. And then I drove the Taycan rear wheel drive the other day, and that was a big step on from the first Taycan I drove. I actually spent time in that thinking, yes, I could live with this on a day-to-day basis, and actually the fundamental balance of the car and the steering was lovely, and you sort of think, yes, this shows a glimmer of what I'm looking for in a electric car to sort of pick the ball up and run with it, because I think there's so much been, as you were saying before, the fact that this Taycan rear-wheel drive wasn't as fast as a Turbo S, I think was a massive benefit to the way it drove, and not having a really jumpy throttle with lots of instant torque and stuff. It just seemed, so yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see where it goes, and it will get. You know,
we'll end up. We may not end up, but I hope we end up with a blend that is the optimum blend of all the stuff, whether it's synthetic fuels plus electric plus blah 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 blah, so that we can adjust the ECUs on our old bangers and still drive them around. But day to day, we'll probably all be driving electric cars. That's probably just what it's going to be.
And there isn't a reason why they can't still be engaging and interesting. You sort of think of the gearbox and engine is a massive part of something like an Alfaholic, you come back to that, but actually the chassis on it and the dynamics and what makes it enjoyable and the sort of the steering and the way it moves through a corner when you're on or off throttle or whatever, all that, there is to me no reason why we can't have that in an enjoyable modern electric driver's car. And once you've got all that, well, then you're a long way down the road to actually thinking, I don't mind driving one of those and taking it out on a
totally. Maybe. I drove an Elise. I can't remember which one it was, a new-ish one, about a year ago, and it was really quiet, the engine. And I was driving down a country road, like sort of spirited drive, and I'd had this weird moment of like, you know what? This could be electric. Like, it's not electric, but it could be electric. And because I can't really hear the engine anyway, I can hear all the other sounds, and it's light, and I can hear what's happening at the front left tire and then the front right tire and the back left and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, I could see this being fun if and when we can make electric cars that light.
Yes. So, yeah. Which is a big
take some time. But
there we are.
Anyway, thanks very much. Thanks very much for coming on the podcast.
Well, it's always been nice just having a chat, isn't it?
Yeah,
so, there we are. Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks very much.